Hello, my name is Ashton Nichols, and I'm a professor of Sustainability Studies and English at Dickinson College in Pennsylvania. My talk today is entitled Urbanatural Roosting, a New View of Nature. Part 1 will focus on the idea of urbanature. The time has come for a new idea and a new word to describe that idea. The new word is urbanature. The idea this word describes suggests that nature and urban life are not as distinct as human beings have long supposed. The term urbanature rhymes with furniture, suggests that all human and non-human lives, as well as all animate and inanimate objects around those lives, are linked in a complex web of interdependent interrelatedness. Let me explain. Hawks are roosting on skyscrapers near Central Park East and Central Park West. Peregrine falcons are feeding on the Flatiron Building, and owls are nesting throughout Manhattan. Meanwhile, thousands of environmentalists are boarding carbon-gulping airplanes, flying hundreds of thousands of miles, carrying tons of petrochemical Gore-Tex in order, as they say, to get back to nature in Montana or Mauritius. At the same time, the World Wide Web tells us that Henry David Thoreau said, "In wilderness is the preservation of the world." Over 600 websites say this, but Thoreau never said, "In wilderness is the preservation of the world." He said, "In wildness is the preservation of the world." That difference between wildness and wilderness makes all the difference. The interconnectedness demanded by urbanature insists that human beings are not out of nature when they stand in the streets of Manhattan, any more than they are in nature when they stand above the tree line in Montana. When nature lovers say that they long to return to nature, they are making what the philosophers call a category mistake. As Tyler Stallings has recently noted, there is no real nature to which to return. Rather, in the face of burgeoning technologies, such as nanotechnology and genetic manipulation, the once defined border between nature and culture is obsolete. Urban culture and wild nature come to much the same thing, urbanature. So far, only a handful of artists and designers have invoked this portmanteau word, urbanature, to describe this important link between city style and wild style. The designer and illustrator Shauna L. Handke invoked the term in 2008 as the name of an online shop. "Urban is our nature," she said. "Design is in our nature." This was a shop she was opening to create a world that shares life the way I see it. I get torn between the hustle and bustle of the urban world and the stillness that you can find in nature. Of course, if you look, you can find this stillness wherever you go. Urbanature is also the name of a group of landscape architects in New Zealand and Singapore who seek to exhibit the, quote, interplay of nature in the urban city. A Seattle rock band has adopted the name urbanature, and a German experimental electronic musician, Iho Ganesh, calls himself Urba-nature. Until now, however, no one has offered this term as a way of pointing up the need for a less contested, more cooperative relationship between urban dwellers and advocates of wilderness. My coinage urbanature as a critical term has important connections to recent arguments about the need to rethink the idea of nature altogether. Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment ideas of nature, like a number of other concepts, have been invoked in so many differing ways over the centuries that they are now well past due for a rigorous verbal and cultural critique. A number of such ideas, my own list would include at least imagination, identity, self, and consciousness, are concepts that now seem worn down and enervated, often misunderstood, and more often misapplied. A rigorous critique of nature is called for by a number of current scholars and should also be of interest to all people who worry about their relationship to their non-human surroundings. This book will make use of numerous texts, romantic poems, essays, Victorian prose fiction, contemporary eco-critical writings, and several methodological approaches: personal memoir, narrative scholarship, historical analysis, and ecocriticism, to argue for a rethinking of the idea of nature as it has been used since at least the middle of the 18th century. Crucial to urbanature is the idea that human beings are never cut off from wild nature by human culture. This is one of the central truths of all ecology. Nothing I can do can take me out of nature. There's nowhere for me to go. I am a natural being from the moment I am born biologically until the moment I die organically. Instead of describing the non-human world anthropocentrically, in human-centered terms, there are now good reasons to describe the whole world ecocentrically, from the term eco, or the Greek oikos, meaning house. In addition, the wild places that many environmentalists have wanted to set aside in order to preserve nature have often allowed those same environmentalists to ignore urban spaces, to assume that urban spaces were somehow beyond their purview, were somehow someone else's problem. As my new book, Beyond Romantic Ecocriticism, Toward Urbannatural Roosting, published by Palgrave Macmillan and available in paperback this coming August, makes very clear, however, the non-human natural house that I inhabit is the same place as my fully human cultural home. The time has come to apply the concept of urbanature widely, from the semi-wild edges of the Himalayas to the ecologically contiguous villages of the European Alps, from the mid-Pacific Isles of Polynesia to the middle Atlantic hills of North America. Urbanature also accurately describes wide suburban sprawl filled with millions upon billions of flowers, trees, squirrels, and raptors, reaching from the Pacific edge of the Americas to the Ural edges of Europe, from the Asian steppes to the Andean fastnesses. This linking of urban spaces with natural places must also include wild and semi-wild creatures, animals in zoo cages, pets in high-rise condominiums, creatures on sidewalks, roofs, and skyscraper ledges, from Bombay to Caracas, from Beijing to Brooklyn. Urbanature includes the biggest of all big pictures, every gust of solar wind and every swirl of every galaxy, but also every mountaineer climbing a mountain and every chemist making a new medicine, birds on buildings and fish in fish ponds, as well as the smallest of all small pictures, pulsing microbes, bacteria, bacilli, and viruses. The globe has now been completely mapped, filmed, and photographed. From those 1960 snapshots of the delicate blue-green planet from outer space, down to the smallest streetscape and stream bed. With my own computer mouse, and with MapQuest or Google Earth, I can move from Mauritius to Manhattan in a minute. I can spin from the Seychelles to Seattle in a second. I can zoom down onto every housetop I can see almost every car in every parking lot. But I don't take this to be a problem. This is not a loss. In fact, my ability to scan the surface of the globe with my computer in seconds is part of what assures me that I am linked to every living creature and every material object that surrounds me. Children growing up in their 21st century Google Earth world will never be able to conceive of the idea of wilderness in the same way that their parents and grandparents did, as a place so vast that the end of it can hardly be conceived, as a mysterious land area with which humans have almost nothing to do. This romantic idea of wilderness may now be gone, but it has been replaced by an idea of wild spaces that still need to be saved, places that have been saved or have not yet been saved, places and spaces that have been preserved or still need to be preserved for human and much less frequently non-human reasons, the good of the biome, the lives of other species that live there. Society has now reached a stage when some politicians and private citizens, as well as a growing number of scientists and environmentalists, understand that it all needs to be sustained, if not saved in the traditional sense. The non-human and the human, the wild and the tame, the rural and the urban, the entire planet depends upon a new willingness to see urban and natural spaces as equally worth saving. Ecocritical awareness of the environment begins in this sense not with the green revolution of the 1960s and 1970s, but with a new definition of nature first offered by Romantic writers in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. My new idea of Urbanatural Roosting examines a number of these writers and their ideas, and then charts a pervasive paradigm shift, a revolutionary turn away from a fallen version of nature that was static and unchanging, toward a romantic view of nature characterized by dynamic links among all living things. This shift eventually leads toward a new emphasis on connections between nature and society.